Wetlands is the latest effort at trying to make an interactive movie for the PC, which seems to be one of the biggest fads in PC gaming today.
Origin was quite successful in Wing Commander 3, utilizing live actors in their cinematics that tied together the action sequences. But Wetlands has taken the approach of using animation instead of live actors in the cinematic sequences, which is a bit of a departure from what the rest of the industry is doing these days.
With Wetlands, New World Computing shows that animation is often more believable than live actors in creating an interactive movie feel. The actors and the backgrounds look and act exactly like they're supposed to, and the result is very convincing.
And the action sequences that are sandwiched between the movie scenes are not bad either, but the movie really steals the show in Wetlands.
A comic book section in the manual sets up the story, which begins as a scientist named Philip Naj is testing a nuclear weapon that he's developed. He discovers that the weapon might have an adverse effect on weather patterns, but the military ignores his warnings and continues with the project.
And as you would expect, when it comes time for full testing, the weapon wreaks havoc with the weather, and Naj, the guy who warned this might happen, gets blamed for the whole thing. They lock him up and he swears he'll get even.
The storm created by the weapon got worse and worse. Naj knew how to stop it, but he wouldn't talk, exacting his revenge.
So the storm just kept on for years until 98% of the Earth's surface was covered with water and 98% of the population was dead. Thus, the Earth became known as Wetlands.
Naj wasn't caught in the flooding, but sent away to a high-security prison known as Alpha 16 on another planet. The game begins when a group of commandos bust Naj out.
The escape ship was tracked to Wetlands, which has become a hideout for the scum and criminals of the galaxy. So the government has hired you, John Cole, to track Naj down and bring him back.
The story in Wetlands is really brought to life by the second-to-none cinematics, easily the high point of the game. The decision to go with animation instead of live actors was brilliant. You've got to see it to believe it.
A lot of the cinematics were 3D rendered by computer, like ships flying through space or cruising through the water, but the parts of the story involving the characters were created with cell animation. This makes it look as good as any animation you've seen on television or at the movies.
In fact, if this thing would have been made a few years ago, it would have been perfect for the movie Heavy Metal. The cinematics in Wetlands are just one big, fantastic trip. Having such a well-done movie portion is a great incentive to get through the action sequences.
Hopefully, a version of the game will be released where you can view all of the movie from beginning to end without having to first get through the arcade parts.
The world of Wetlands is very dark, and the characters are even darker. If you're a fan of Clint Eastwood or Sylvester Stallone, you're gonna go crazy over John Cole, the rootin'est, tootin'est, shootin'est cowboy west of the, well, anywhere, really.
This guy is tough, mean, and he scowls all the time, unless something involving shooting and big explosions is mentioned. I mean, when he's told that he's going into an area that he'll probably be ambushed in, he just responds in true Eastwood fashion.
That's their problem. His low-key approach can get a bit corny at times, but who are IE reviewers to criticize for corny?
Be that as it may, this is comic book theater at its best, and if you're a fan of graphic, dark sci-fi stuff,
like Blade Runner or Aliens,
then you're in for a real treat with Wetlands. This game has more atmosphere than a lot of big-budget movies in the theaters these days.
The action sequences, while being overshadowed by the movie, are fun in and of themselves.
Most of the action is seen from a first-person perspective, but the player has no control over the direction of movement. Instead, the computer controls everything.
Everything, that is, except what to shoot at. The one thing that the player does in the action sequences is use the mouse or joystick to move the targeting reticle around the screen, highlighting the bad guys and blowing them away.
Of course, this is going to get old for a lot of folks for a few reasons. The most obvious being that all you do is put your cursor on a bad guy and push the button. It's a lot more difficult than it sounds, but there's just not much to do.
The bad guys come at you from the same places every time you play, and even if you see a target on the screen, unless the computer targets them, even if you're wailing on them with your lasers, you just can't kill them.
As impressive as the movie and other graphics are, there just isn't any semblance of replayability in Wetlands.
But even though replayability is low in this game, you almost won't care with all of the graphics. When something blows up, it's just about as impressive as it can possibly be.
The designers in this game could give lessons on how to make an explosion. I know that it may not be the most important part of the game, but it sure is a lot more gratifying to play when there's attention to details like this.
And to compensate for the lack of interactivity with movement, the graphics that you'll be flying through are simply extraordinary. It's as much fun to watch this game as it is to play it.
And to say there's no interactivity in Wetlands is selling it short. There is a small bit of movement to the left and the right that the player can control, but it's more like turning your head than controlling the direction of the ship.
And in certain missions, you can actually choose which direction to go when you come to a junction, although it doesn't seem to matter much since the mission is over whenever you kill enough of the bad guys.
But every mission isn't just played from a first-person view. One mission involves an overhead view of an underwater probe you control in order to blast sonar stations. In this scenario, unlike all the others, you don't use your mouse as a target device.
Instead, it serves as an accelerator, so instead of moving the probe, the mouse accelerates the probe in the direction you move it, which proves impossible to control. In fact, we're not sure about the mental problems that going between these two modes of control might cause. Bob here volunteered to find out for us. Bob, what do you think?
Hey man, I really think that Zephyr was a great game, man. No, really. Keanu Reeves is a great actor.
Wow, this is worse than we ever thought. Bob, we'll miss you, man.
We tried hooking up the joystick and got drastically improved control over the probe, but the fire buttons didn't work right. The game seemed to recognize that the fire button was being pressed only about 20% of the time. We called tech support at New World and found that other folks were having the exact same problem.
So it's either cope with the impossible-to-use mouse controls where the fire buttons work, or use the easy-to-control joysticks where the fire buttons don't work. You might want to wait for a patch fixing this problem to be released before buying the game.
But in the end, you'll probably want to get Wetlands. If you haven't gotten the point yet, the cinematics are simply phenomenal.
The action is a very no-brainer kind of fun. Not very involving, but fun all the same. Having random targets would have helped in the replayability, but the real fun in Wetlands isn't blowing away the bad guys, but watching John Cole track down and mow down the bad guys in the movie parts.
Until now, cinematic sequences have just been used to connect missions, but Wetlands is right up there with Wing Commander 3 as far as the pure enjoyment of just the movie sections. I may have even liked the Wetlands cinematics a tad better.
It really needs a patch for that joystick problem because try as I might, I just can't get past that one mission. But New World said they were going to get on it right away, so hopefully we won't have to wait too long.
Wetlands is the direction that this kind of game should go in. This is about as fun as interactive movies get.